Good morning, everyone, because it is morning. My name is Jamaica Miles. I'm co-founder, executive director of All of Us, and really excited to be here to have a conversation about shared struggle, the things that bind us, the history of oppression and exploitation and colonization that unfortunately is a global pandemic and has been for hundreds of years. And joining me are some wonderful folks that agreed to have this conversation. Dr. Sahib, I'll start with you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And Jamaica, it's a blessing to be here with you. I really admire the work that you do, and it's an honor to be here. Personally, I'm an educator, community leader, an activist, and a motivational speaker. And maybe I will actually hand the mic over to my student,
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Harrison White. I'm a senior at Union College. Dr. Sahib is my professor in Arabic, which I've been studying for the past year. But my major is classics. I study ancient history and ancient language, Latin and Greek, and I have a particular interest in the ancient world and how it influences modern day, and also Irish history, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But happy to be here, and thank you, Jamaica, for having me.
No, absolutely. So that is what we're talking about, right, Dr. Sahib? It is, we come from different backgrounds, but we've got a lot more in common than we have differences.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is, Jamaica, it's really amazing. Just look at the three of us. And for you, it says all of us, right? And we do represent, there you go. The first thing that I really want to start with, we represent the gender, we represent the race, we represent the generations. I think for me, honestly, it's a blessing to be here because I've always wanted to have, Harrison is young. We're both young, right, Jamaica? Harrison's
Absolutely.
younger. And this the fact that we all come from different backgrounds. Myself, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background so we can put things in perspective, and maybe Jamaica will do the same, and Harrison already started us on that. Originally my parents are from Algeria. I'm born here in Albany, as local as it gets. But I would never forget my ancestors and the history that it's very rich, with a lot of darkness. And I think that's where we're also individually at our own, personal experiences. We'll talk about that and bring that to kind of the situation that we have here and why we're all believing and feeling that, we have this obligation. The human obligation is not because we're feeling bad for somebody else, because our faith is shared. We are one into this. It doesn't matter if this happened to your forefathers or happening to you, which is happening to a lot of us, and Jamaica will kind of fill us in into that. And that's what we're trying to tackle today is the history. And Harrison, he spoke about the fact that his major is focusing on history, and history repeats itself. And we are making history today. And I was actually Jamaica earlier. I was talking to Harrison. I said, it's amazing how we look at these people and the pictures and the videos of these activists. And I said, you know what? People will be watching this video when we're all kind of long gone. And because we're paving the way for this conversation, for this unity, all of us, right? So Jamaica, tell us a little bit more and we'll dive in.
Yeah, so yes, my name again, Jamaica Miles, born and raised in the city of Schenectady. I'm a Black woman in America, kaka. I do spell it with three Ks, because of the long history of oppression and exploitation of Black folks on this land, as well as the genocide that happened to the indigenous of this land, in the creation of this country. This is still one of the colonized lands in the world that has not given land back to the indigenous folks or had reparations for those who lived here before the settlements and the colonization and the enslaved Africans that were stolen and brought here. My father was born in 1928 in Richmond, Virginia. My great grandmother was born in the late 1800s. I actually met her as a child. My great grandmother was indigenous of this land, and raised in that culture before she left the reservation, because she said, that's not my president, a long time before anyone else did. So that's the history I come from, of hearing those words and understanding the long, long, long history of what it means to be a marginalized group. Also a woman, because we know women's rights is something that we still continue to fight for. We're not there yet, as we are not there yet for Black folks and other people of color and other different intersections of folks, right? In this land that I call home. So that's where I come to this space from, is that historical knowledge and that personal familial knowledge of what it means to be in this country right now, and looking forward to this conversation about how we do represent all of these differences, but we do have a shared history. And I'd love to hear Harrison's thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's very interesting what you're just saying. So as I mentioned, I'm super in tune with Irish history. All the way back to 800 years ago when it all started, the colonization and imperialism in Ireland, and so the pains of genocide, and murder, torture, rape in Ireland go back, slavery go back 800 years. From Great Britain, who's always been an imperial power over Ireland, and there's a very deep pain for the Irish people that it hasn't gone away, and I don't think it will, um, for that reason. And um, especially in recent years, since the 70s and 80s, Ireland and Palestine have had a very close relationship, through those similar pains. And there's so just a little background. My family's from Northern Ireland, and that's where most of the conflict, um, since the 1920s, but especially since the 1960s, that's where most of the conflict occurred, in Northern Ireland. And my family, who are the Harrisons, that's where I got my name, the Harrisons of Northern Ireland, um, immigrated in the 20s. Um, but so yeah, so there's the you see it all throughout Northern Ireland, um, the remnants of that pain. And there's been a lot of efforts by the Irish government to try to, healing efforts, social, political, economic, but it hasn't gone away, and it's still, there's a black cloud lingering, especially because Great Britain, you know, still operates Northern Ireland. But what's fascinating between the relationship between Palestine and Ireland, it goes back to the 1960s, um, and was, I think, mostly promoted by Yasser Arafat, who was a leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and a hero to Palestine, because he was really, I think, one of the most stood out to Israel, who was also an imperialistic superpower. And there's a number of Irish heroes who were painted as terrorists: Michael Collins, Kevin Barry, Bobby Sands. But now they're seen as martyrs, for Irish independence and for humanitarian peace, and that's been the common goal for them. And um, I've especially taking Arabic with Dr. Sahib, I've really, really become fascinated with the relationship of solidarity, which it's a dominant in Arabic.
Yeah,
Um, and it's absolutely fascinating, the the seeking for peace. And now especially the Irish government, and their support for Palestine, because clearly Palestine is going through very, very hard trouble right now with Israel's oppression and genocide. The Irish government is putting in a lot of effort to support them. I think in total they've um, provided $20 million. Um, and I've become absolutely fascinated with the pain through solidarity, or the solidarity through pain. And I,
and
I
yeah,
think it's a really important thing to recognize between cultures and between groups of people, and because it's it really connects people down to the core.
Absolutely.
absolutely. One thing that Harrison mentioned, and I think Jamaica also mentioned, which a lot of people have this assimilation mentality in this country that you know what, you strip yourself from your identity. And something really fascinating, like I'm going to be talking a little bit about the experience of the Algerians, even though I was not born during the occupation, but just like Harrison said, it's almost like generations, like it's almost in our genetics that that history, like I can assure you, like when I read and learn about the history of Ireland, I would not read it the same way that Harrison reads it, right? Or Jamaica reads about slavery and the indigenous people in this country. Because for us, you can't. I don't know. It's like I can't explain it. It's like it's in you. These are my people, and you even feel the pain. We feel the pain for others, but when your own history, and I think this is what it's allowing us to have this empathy, and we feel our fate is shared, right? Both my parents were born during the occupation, like towards the end of it. But when I speak about it, I was occupied. My people were occupied, just like Harrison is talking about the geographical location where his family is coming from, even though you were born here, right? But that is part of you. It's like nobody will take that away from you, right? And I think and the connection that you're able to make, which unfortunately a lot of people are not able to make that connection to say, you know what, it's a shared struggle, right? The Irish people still are traumatized by that, and a lot of people say, you know what, the occupation ended. Just like, again, Jamaica said, you know what, we still have a lot of work to do in this country, let alone globally, right? A lot of people are like, oh, it ended, stop whining. No, we're not whining. We're still in pain. My people still, the history, it's there, that dark cloud that Harrison mentioned about, it's still there, man. It doesn't matter how many suns will rise every day. That cloud for our people is still there. And you know what? It's painful and we still feel it. And that's why we will continue to feel other people's pain. What do you think, Jamaica?
I think also there's a shared resilience, right? Because we're talking about liberation fighters. And to Harrison's point that the Western powers, so they should be, were quick to call folks terrorists, right? I talk about it constantly right now. Nelson Mandela was labeled a terrorist by the United States in the beginning. The US wasn't like this long arm of justice that stood up and said, we're fighting for South Africa. Yay, Nelson Mandela. It took time. The same shift we're seeing now, but the resilience of the people and the global cry for justice, right? That shared unity across these imaginary borders created by colonizers that were restricting people's movements, determining what was appropriate for them to wear, for them to speak, right? Language, you spoke about this, that assimilation mindset that I don't believe comes from us, but it's put on us. That we are told we must assimilate, and those who can assimilate hold higher privilege, and those who cannot will receive even harsher societal pressures or punishment. But there always being that hierarchy that is based on white supremacy and that norm that this country said it was running away from, right? We want to break away from Britain and we want to do something ourselves. We'd like to be worse. That's who the government said. We don't want to be like Britain. We're going to one up them. We're going to show them how to really do racism and capitalism and rule the world. But yeah, I agree with you, that common struggle, but also really the common resilience, the freedom fighters, the liberation movements that united people across differences. That I think is really important for us to lift up.
I think this is just building on this, and I think the three of us will agree on this, right? I mean, it's like assimilation or what else? And I always say, or integration, because you integrate, you come the way you are. And I think this is, I can speak for my community, right? One thing I tell my students, I tell them, like, listen, you are US citizens, right? Because a lot of times if you don't assimilate, you're already dropped to the second class, right? And this is supremacy, right? You're inferior to me because you're not fitting 100% into the box that I put together. And even for Harrison, and I feel for, a lot of white people who are like, oh, you're betraying our race. And it's like you almost this guilt tripping thing is like, if you're not on this side, how could you be? And this happened with, I mean, you talk about the 60s, right? In this country, a lot of white folks said, you know what? We are part of the human race. We're not part of this white race. And they were seen to be terrorists, right? You betrayed the system, and I think for the three of us, I think we will agree on this. We are integrated. We know that we have ownership into this and we are to resist. And I always say your loyalty to the country doesn't mean blind loyalty to the government. To the contrary, because we're loyal to the human race. And I love the fact that you mentioned these borders things. It's like the 1% decided, you know what, this is how we're going to split up the world, right? And people are just going to have to submit to that. And again, that's something that we have to take a step back and say, you know what, do we actually have a say into this? And a lot of people, and I think this is for Harrison, a lot of people want instant results, right? And Jamaica, you can speak to this as an activist. You've been doing this for a long time. And a lot of times you're not going to see the results today, right? Martin Luther King, we're still fighting his fight, right? Malcolm X was still fighting his fight, right? All these, and even in Ireland, all these, heroes, they paved the way for Harrison to be able to speak today and still knows there's a lot to be done in Ireland and in the US.
Yeah, and I actually would like to hear from Harrison, like that historical piece, right? Because you're the history guy, of what it meant to be divided in Ireland. Because some folks may look at Ireland and say they all look the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what did division mean for Ireland?
Yeah, and that's a major piece of the troubles in Ireland, because on top of the British oppression, they also had internal problems. There was major conflict between the North and the South, because the South, the Republic of Ireland, they wanted nothing to do with Great Britain, and the Northern Ireland, they were willing to settle for British control as long as it meant peace. And the South, they were not okay with that. So that created extreme division between the North and the South. And the British influence on the North was mostly a Protestant population, and for the Republic, it was mostly a Catholic population, and that created really intense turmoil. So on top of the oppression, they also had a lot of internal division, and that I think now there's a one identity, but for a long time there was really extreme division. And I think it's important to go back to what you're talking about, resilience, because that's all I think about when I think of my ancestors, is just a resilient people. And one thing that I've learned by studying Arabic is in the similarities of their struggle, is when these freedom fighters try to be resilient, the imperial powers, they try to paint them as terrorists, and they come up with ways to try to beat them down and do whatever they can to keep them under the rug. And one of those ways was imprisoning people without trial, and that was a major issue in Ireland in the 70s and 80s, implemented by Margaret Thatcher, who really brought a lot of pain to Ireland through torture and genocide. And so yeah, thousands of people were imprisoned without trial, and then the same thing was happening in Palestine, implemented by Israel. The people were in prison
And still are.
without any reason. Yes. And there was in the 70s and 80s, there were these massive hunger strikes. And again, these people that were in prison, Bobby Sands was the most famous in Ireland. I mean, he was a true martyr, but again, painted as a terrorist. And he died in prison, hunger striking. And that was a major influence on the Irish people. It really it helped create a true identity for liberation.
It also impacted Palestine because there was that connection, right, Harrison, between the Palestinian fighters and the the Irish fighters, which a lot of people talk about, and I think it's a very important piece. If you could just enlighten us on that.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of communication between the PLO and the IRA, especially in the 70s and 80s, sneaking letters out of prison. Again, these people are in prison without trial, and they're communicating with the IRA, and they're sending arms. They're sending arms for the fight for independence, and the IRA is sending arms to Palestine, and Palestine is sending arms when they can to Ireland, and they're providing money and social support, political, economic, and it's just that connection it's so fascinating and
Yeah.
And extended to the Black community in the US. In the 60s, Angela Davis, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, these are names that are considered highly popular in the US, right? Like folks know who they are. And I'm like, I've been trying to educate people to say, yeah, they were already fighting for Palestine in the 1960s. And they're just like, wait, what? No, there was the Black Liberation Movement. Yes, it was. And it was connected to the Palestinian Liberation Movement. One of the fun facts that I have to share during this conversation is that during the Ferguson uprising and the horrible murder of Michael Brown, as so many others, it was Palestine that shared information about how to handle tear gas because they were being tear gassed by the same chemical warfare created by the US and being used on freedom fighters in both places. So they were communicating with Black organizers and activists to say, hey, listen, don't rub your eyes, look for the direction of the wind, only use water. That came from Palestine to Black liberation fighters in the 2000s, right? We're not talking about the 60s, the 70s, or before. We're not talking about the civil rights movement. We're talking about the right now. And that is because there was already this long-standing relationship between the Black liberation movement and the fight for freedom in Palestine, as well as all of these other places. Like I'm pointing at all the different squares, like we're on Hollywood Squares, that there is that connectedness that is long-standing.
Absolutely, and I think to summarize what Jamaica, you said, and Harrison, look at the history. South Africa, by the way, they were connected with Palestinians. The Irish people were connected, right? That's history. Fast forward, Ireland is a strong standing country in support of Palestine. South Africa is a strong standing and advocate, right, in the court, in the international court. And look at it, it's like we are connected. I think what we need to do is to see that. I think the three of us are seeing it historically, and we're seeing it at this moment. And I think we are making this connection. The three of us were Algerians actually trained with Palestinians and vice versa. South Africans did that. Just like, Harrison mentioned here, like in our present time, the Palestinians, kind of like, talking to our people here who are still fighting the fight. And I think, that resistance, we do need the support. And I think we are each other's keepers, right? We are our brothers and sisters keepers. And I think divide and conquer, and I think this takes me back to South and North Ireland. That's what the colonizers do, man. It's like they divide and conquer. You cannot have, and this is happening exactly in Palestine. You have Gaza and you have the West Bank. They managed to divide them, right? And make sure that they're separated. And because that's what maintains your power and retains it for the longest time. And they don't here as well. They divide us by class, they divide us by gender, they divide us by race. I mean, you name it. And unless we again appreciate who we are individually, but even more collectively, I think we will fail to see the goal, and that is to really support each other and keep pushing forward.
I really do think that everyone learns from the United States. Again, when the racism that plagued and continues to plague this country, that was born from chattel slavery, not to be confused with all of the other slavery. Oh, everyone was enslaved. Chattel slavery, You couldn't get out of it. Your children were born into it. You were enslaved. You were not an indentured servant. You weren't going to work off your debt. You were going to die an enslaved individual, is the blueprint for how to create division, how to ensure that folks stay separated, and how to effectively oppress and exploit individuals. Bacon's Rebellion, as well as others in the United States, was this call for unity between white and black enslaved folks. And when the masters caught them, they said, listen, so here's what I'm gonna do. And I tell this story all the time. You white people, you're like us, okay? You're not like them. And I'm gonna add a couple years to your sentence. I'm super overgeneralizing. This is not historical fact, like, you know, but I'm gonna extend your sentence a little bit. I'm gonna go cut off his hand. The other one I'm gonna beat to death. Like, if you don't want that to happen to you, right?
Yeah.
Don't be with them, because you're not them. Look, we're the same, right? We're the same. We're gonna work together. I'm here for you. I'm helping you from the big house that I have with all the things. And that idea of, well, shit, I don't want to die. And he said, we're alike. And so I could someday have a big house if I just do what he says, because he knows what he's doing. How'd he get the big house if he didn't know what he was doing? Again, narrative story, but based on historical facts. That division that they still are fighting today, because we find a way to come back together. The Black Panther Party pulled together the Young Lords, Latinx folks, the Patriots, some seriously racist, white, patriotic folks who said, we all hate police brutality. We all need housing. We want jobs. We want healthcare. We want good schools for our kids. And we see that the systems and structures in place are not working for us poor folks. And when they got together, FBI did all of its things, and there were assassinations and all types of operatives that destroyed a movement from within. And here we are, the United States, repeating history again. So while we continue to fight against the internal division, our government is last to the game to call for liberation. Just like with South Africa, we started off on the wrong side of history, and then we're like, oh crap. And by we, the government, not us, the people, because the people were the ones pressing the government to say, no, that's wrong. What are you doing? What? And here we are again with Palestine. And I only refer to it as Palestine, where the government said, oh no, we're always going to support Israel because we were one of the reasons Israel exists today. So how dare we say that Israel is wrong? And we don't want people thinking they could get their land back. Why would we want to put that out there? And so we're supporting Israel until it really, really is bad. I mean, it was already really bad, but you know, there was a fault line for the US government that said, crap, Netanyahu, come on, man. We gave you as much room as we could, but yeah. And the best they could do was abstain from the ceasefire vote.
But to your point, Jamaica, I think we have to be careful, because they are continuing the support for Israel. The only issue they're having is Netanyahu. They're not having an issue with Israel, because I don't want people to think, oh, look, our government, they're changing. No, they're not. They're not. Trust me. They're still supporting the occupation. They're still supporting the killing of people. They're just saying Netanyahu is overdoing it. He's too spoiled, right? We want you to be a spoiled brat, but you're overdoing it. So Netanyahu, we need to change you with somebody else. We'll keep doing what you're doing, but with more control. So I want people, because I don't want anyone to think, oh, hold on, they passed the resolution, which is, by the way, it's very weak. We have to also mention. Yeah, so because some people are waiting just to take that backseat and say, look, oh, we've achieved. No, we didn't, right? That's why we have the resolution that we're pushing for within the city of Schenectady, right? And we're not going to back down. We're going to keep pushing, and we have a very diverse group of people who are pushing for this, and we want this to pass because we want to send the message that, you know what, we, the people, are making this statement, right? And our government, from the Democrats and Republicans, they don't like when we mobilize. They don't like when we come together and say, you know what, we're all fighting for the freedom. And these are like basic human rights, right? They have divided us for the longest time. I think we still have a lot of work to do. And I hope anyone who's watching today leave with optimism, saying that, you know what, we are working, but please don't think this is the end of it. This is just the start, right, Jamaica? Because you're at the front line and you've been fighting. Because a lot of people, they love to go back to their comfort seat, right? And I love what Harrison said, is it's still there. The pain is still there. And as long as the pain is still there, we're going to die with that pain, right? Because I don't think any one of us should die in peace, in a sense, saying, oh, I've done my job. I think all of us, those who care, we should always think that we could have done more. And I think that's what's going to keep us going. That's my conclusion on my end.
I was
Guys,
going to say we are running short on time, and so I do want to pass it back to Harrison. Final thoughts or message to folks, especially about how the struggle continues.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking, when you keep saying the support for other groups, and how South Africa supports Palestine, Ireland, and the Black community in America. I think that's an absolute, despite the pain and the suffering that continues, I think that is one of the most beautiful things in humanity, is that support for one another through the solidarity, through similar pains and similar feelings. And I think we all have something really interesting to contribute to that conversation. And I'm fascinated by the support for one another, despite different backgrounds and whatnot. And I'm very appreciative to have had this conversation. And again, I thank you for having me.
Absolutely, because it takes all of us. It takes
absolutely.
all of us. And my final thoughts and my final words is that this is one of many conversations that's yet to be had about all of the different ways that we are connected, that we need to free the people, we need to free all people. It is not, none of us is free until all of us are free. And I do want to leave with the quote that I gave at the beginning of my comments during the city council meeting. It's from Lila Watson, who's an Aboriginal activist and organizer in Australia. And she said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. And whenever my other co-founder and I say this quote and don't have it in front of us, we say, if you've come to help me, kick rocks. But if you recognize that, we're in this together, then let's do this. And it's the same sentiment. And I think that this conversation shows that unity and solidarity, as well as the conversations that are yet to come that discuss how we are connected globally. And it is a global fight for liberation. And so thank you both for being here, Harrison, Dr. Sahib, and we will be sure to have a conversation again in the near future. Everyone have a good day.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.